What's going on, everybody? Black and Gold Breakdown, second one this week. Jared Bailey with you as always behind the Steel Curtain USA Today. Joined by my friend, Derek Bell from Steelers Now. It's good to see you, buddy.
Yeah, it's good to see you too. Ready to talk some ball, man. Been a quiet week on the Steelers front. I feel like over the past week or two, but we're like in the thick of draft season, man. I'm getting that itch. I'm like so ready for things to kick off later in the month, trying to finish up all these evals. So it's been it's keeping me busy for sure.
Absolutely. I was thinking about this the other day. Is this like, do you think this is the busiest Steelers off season of your lifetime? I don't. How old are you?
So I just turned 30.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, I can't think of. I mean that especially the first week. I mean, things have tapered off a lot
Yeah.
since then, but that first week, man, was absolutely nuts. I don't really remember anything quite like that in my lifetime, at least. But I mean, it's good for the content game, as you know,
Yeah.
and it's also like I also think it's cool from a fan perspective. I know a lot of people are so conditioned to the quote unquote, Steelers way of doing things. And,
Mm.
they just kind of, they're very predictable in a lot of different ways. And, not to say they went too far out of their comfort zone, but it was definitely different. And I think, Omar Khan's kind of brought a little bit different of approach, which is, it's going to take some getting used to for sure.
It's refreshing, which is nice. I mean, this is probably the most excited I've been going into a season probably since pre-elbow injury Ben. So it's been a hot minute since we've had, at least since I've had, like the big anticipation of like, all right, you know what, they've made this many moves already. Still have the draft to go. Um, Still have some holes to fill though, and one of those holes we're going to talk about today, the receiver position. You just did your draft position rankings over at Steelers Now. So this feels pretty fitting to discuss wide receivers today. Um, the Steelers obviously needing another perimeter guy, probably another slot guy, really, in terms of who's going to be the predominant pass catchers in the offense. So we'll start with somebody who Steelers fans seem to be really gravitating towards. Steelers media seem to really like. If he's there in the second round, is Ricky Pearsall going to be the next Pittsburgh Steeler? I think that the due diligence that they've done and what he looks like on film and whatnot, I don't think a lot of Steelers fans would hate that.
Yeah, I think, it's really funny because like back in I want to say like early January, I just happened to be watching a different player and he just kept popping on film and I ended up looking him up and then I remembered that catch he made. He made a crazy like one-hand catch.
Yeah, it was like a
Um
sideways hand catch
yeah,
type
it
thing.
ended up on
Yeah.
like Sports Center and like that's how I like knew him from. But I was not really familiar with his game, man. To be honest with you, even scouting Anthony Richardson, I wasn't really a fan of watching too much Florida ball over the past
Mm,
couple of years. But having said that, I started like kind of diving into his film, and I was like, man, this dude's flying way under the radar. And this was when he was still projected as like a third, fourth round pick.
mm.
And then I remember writing about him before the combine. I didn't know that he was going to test like a freak
Yeah.
athlete. I mean, he had like a 9.9 relative athletic score, something like that. But Pearsall's awesome, man. Like he's a very good player. I think he's definitely in the mix at 51. I think the thing with him is his hands are just outstanding. I mean, the
Mm.
catches away from his frame, the way he can adjust to poorly thrown footballs. Really snappy route runner. I think he's a good. I knew that he was a good athlete, but I didn't think that he was going to test like an absolute freak. But just a very refined receiver, and like you mentioned, somebody that can play, in the slot. They don't really have that kind of prototype right now. But I also think he gives you enough kind of Z versatility to where he can flip outside as well, and just a really good route runner. Understands how to set defenders up. So he's a guy that I definitely think makes a lot of sense if you're looking for a nice complementary receiver in the Steelers passing attack.
Yeah, in terms of like having that predominant slot guy that I've grown to like a lot is Malik Washington out of Virginia. One of like the just best pure slot guys in the country over the past year. I think he led the nation in yards and receiving yards from the slot. So, I mean, if he's sitting there when they're in the fourth round, man, I would have a hard time passing him up.
Yeah, no, Malik Washington's tape is awesome, man. I
He's
wanted to
great.
like. I mean, I think I put this in kind of like my blurb for for him. He did come in like right outside like top 15. I can kind of explain why that is, but yeah, I mean his tape is awesome. Everyone in the country knew that he was going to get the ball last year for Virginia, and they still couldn't
Mhm.
stop him. I mean, he was absolutely dynamite. The way that his contact balance after the catch, I mean, he's only about 5'8", 5'9", but he's 190 pounds, so he's got this dense frame. But he knows how to get open, man. Like he just like I said, teams were keying on him, and I felt like it was really obvious that he was going to be the focal point of the passing game week in, week out. Some really intriguing double moves on tape. Like he understands how to create separation for himself. I think the big thing with Washington, and this is kind of where I think if he lands in the right situation, I was actually talking to Tyler Weiss yesterday from Steelers Depot about Washington. I actually think that Washington's game is kind of what I think a lot of people think of when they talk about Malachi Corley from Western.
Mm.
And I think that if he were to land in the right situation where you're playing in like that kind of old school shotgun, 2x2 kind of Peyton Manning type offense where you have this dedicated slot receiver and he just goes and gets open for you and uncovers quickly underneath, he's really valuable. Now, the problem is, like, I think the NFL is gravitating towards more versatility. They want guys that can play inside and outside because a lot of times they want to put the number one receiver in the slot. So in order to do that, you got to be able to kick out your slot receiver to the outside. And at 5'9",
Sure.
doesn't have long arms. Like, I just think that, a lot of his production obviously has came from inside. And I'm not sure that he offers that type of versatility. But if you're just looking for a slot guy, like you said, to just get open and manufacture all these touches underneath, he's a tough cover, man. Like I really thoroughly enjoyed his film, and he's a guy that I'm really curious on where he lands.
Yeah, and there's still a select number of guys like on the free agent market that could fit, more of a slot role. I think Hunter Renfrow is a guy that I would love to see Pittsburgh bring in. Just makes sense. Before Josh McDaniels went to the Raiders, Hunter Renfrow was the talk of the NFL in terms of just how good of a route runner he was from the slot, consistently getting open, not afraid to take hits in the middle of the field and still be able to finish through contact. I still think that guy's there. They just, for whatever reason, Josh McDaniels decided that wasn't what he wanted in his offense. But he's available. I think that that's a call that I would like to see the Steelers make. If it would save them from having to double dip at receiver in the draft. Just bringing in Renfrow and then they can draft another outside guy and be able to address other positions. It makes sense to me. What say you?
Yeah, Renfrow is an interesting player, man. Because like you said, I always think back to that Derwin James clip. When he was on, I think was it the I Am Athlete podcast or something like so. That, where they were talking about, who's the toughest receiver to cover. Everybody's anticipating he's going to say, Keenan Allen or, some of these like top 10 guys that are there year in, year out, guy he sees in practice every week. And he was like, Hunter Renfrow. And everybody I think everybody on social media was like, what? Like this guy? And then, but I mean, you watch Renfrow, it kind of, he has this kind of unorthodox route running style. Can get in and out of his breaks really well, can set defenders up, kind of a lot of deception to his game. Now, the one thing about Renfrow that I think is a little bit difficult that makes his transition to, not every offense is just, he's a little bit of a freestyler as a runner. And I think if you're playing in a more like timing based offense that is expecting you to, all right, the quarterback's going to take 1, 2, 3, you need to be out of your break with your head turned around. Like Renfrow, he didn't really play like that. Like there are times where, he's still kind of doing some of his dancing to set defenders up when the quarterback's already at the back of his drop. And if you're playing in a timing based offense with a quarterback that likes to get the ball out quick, that doesn't always like marry up as consistently as you think. And maybe that's some of the reason that things didn't work out. But I think a lot of players were not happy with their role in that McDaniels offense last couple of years. But yeah, I mean, we can talk a little bit about the approach to the Steelers receiver room. I am still a little bit shocked that, we're sitting here like 3-4 weeks away from the draft and the Steelers don't have a wide receiver 2 or probably a wide receiver 3
that's
or a starting
thing,
center on the roster.
I don't think that they have a 2 or a 3. I think that a lot of Steelers fans are a little bit higher on Calvin Austin than the Steelers are on Calvin Austin. That's not to say that he's not going to, get his snaps in the offense and whatnot, but I think that his role is going to be, probably wide receiver 4 or 5, depending on what they think of Van Jefferson. Punt returner, he'll get, his select touches, but I don't think he's going to be, the third receiver in the offense.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you, I mean, I was actually planning on writing about this over the weekend, but I think if you squint your eyes like a certain way, you can see Van Jefferson or Calvin Austin as your number three guy, depending on who number two is. Because
Sure.
Arthur Smith doesn't use a lot of 11 personnel. They want to be this tight end multiple offense where they're going to really rely on the wide zone game and then kind of play action off that, take shots down the field, be this explosive passing offense but low volume. So you don't necessarily
Mhm.
need three top tier receivers. But you need two. I mean, at the
Yeah.
bare minimum, you need two really good receivers. I mean, in today's NFL, like you have to be four deep there. Ideally, you would have three like really nice targets. They do have Freiermuth. Can he factor in a little bit more in the passing game this year after he was kind of a little bit of a kind of a non-factor last year due to some injuries and then just
Sure.
kind of falling out of the offense a little bit. But I am a little bit surprised at the approach, which I do think makes going into the draft like it's really important that they're able to secure I mean, it's a good receiver class, a class that I'm pretty high on, but who they grab really matters because whoever they draft is going to have to come in and play right away, man. Like
Yeah.
there's not going to be any acclimation period. They're going to have to come in and play probably like 90% of the snaps.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's not a situation where you can take, Mike Wallace in the third round and he's got Santonio Holmes and Hines Ward to sit behind. It's not a situation where you
It's not
can
going to be like
take.
that.
No, it isn't going to be like that. Um, what do you think scale of one, I guess, percentage chance that they go receiver in the first round?
Oh man. Um I want to put it fairly low, but it's not outside of the realm of possibility. I mean, it's difficult too, right? Like, cause if you're like us and you follow the Steelers draft, and kind of the way that things work out every year, traditionally the Steelers have to be, you pretty much have to get the formal, you got to get the top 30, but really the thing that matters is like you have to have the general manager or head coach Mike Tomlin at the pro day, and there's only a couple prospects that really check those boxes this year, so it seems more wide open, and it seems like they could potentially break from that trend. Now there aren't any receivers that really fall into that trend. This year, a guy that I kind of like in the first round is AD Mitchell from Texas. I think that if he lands with the Steelers, like that's perfect for him. And I think it's also like perfect for the Steelers, typically really what they need, in my opinion, if you're talking about going to get like a really, really good running mate for George Pickens. Brian Thomas Jr., another guy that could potentially be there.
Yeah.
Now, I've kind of floated this idea out there over the past like week or so, just with all this different needs. We talked about they don't have a starting center, need multiple receivers. Could they trade back a little bit and maybe like, acquire another day two pick? Like that would
Yeah.
be maybe they trade back with like Buffalo, who's always aggressive in the draft, moving up.
Especially
So,
if a guy like Brian Thomas is sitting there at 20 and you're Buffalo, you're like, all right, we don't have a one or
right.
two receiver right now, so we'll move up.
And then we talk about like all these different like corners that the Steelers have met with recently, like a lot of interest in Nate Wiggins from Clemson. You
Yeah.
talk about like they took Teron Arnold and Cooley McKinstry out to dinner before their pro day. They've had significant interest there. So then if you talk about maybe like, okay, we want one of these corners, but we also still need enough picks to go out and get a starting center, to go out and get a wide receiver two on day two of the draft. Then you can kind of make a lot of those two different things work if you trade back and get more capital. But it's going to be interesting for sure. I don't want to say that it's very likely right now, just based on the interest that they've shown, and it seems like a lot of more day two type of potential.
I would agree. And here we got Samson. What do you think about the Steelers trading down in round one? Yeah, I think that makes the most sense right now for me. Is, hey, if you got a team like, if Tampa Bay wants to move up, or if the Cardinals are sitting there, I think at 27 and they want to move up,
Mhm.
Buffalo at 28 seems to make a lot of sense depending on how the receiver board falls. I think trading back and getting that extra day two pick makes all the sense in the world.
Yeah, another team too. I mean, it's always difficult because, like you said, I mean, in order to trade down, you got to have the partner, right? Like it takes
Yeah.
two to
Yep.
dance, and like that's definitely difficult. And it's impossible to predict like this far out. It's kind of look like when I'm in this type of the draft, I want to look for general managers who have shown the propensity to be aggressive. And I think Brandon Bean definitely fits that billing. I mean, I think he's traded up like four of the last like six drafts or something like that
Yeah.
in the first round. And then I look at maybe like a team like Detroit, who I feel like Detroit's roster is really, really good. I mean, they hit a grand slam last year in the draft, and they also like moved up and down the board to do it. But they're a team that to me really needs another pass rusher opposite Aiden Hutchinson, a guy that can play full time. Maybe if a guy like Latu from UCLA started to fall, like an extremely gifted guy, very refined, big bag of moves. If he were to start to fall, because he's got some medical stuff, I don't know what teams are really going to think of him. He'd be an awesome player. If him or Jared Verse or one of those pass rushers would fall to Detroit, I think that they would be very inclined to get aggressive because of how good the rest of their roster is.
Yeah, and again, I think they will have their selection of dance partners, as you put it, to make a move, just because of somebody's going to be there that one of those teams see as a fit and a need, and that might not be there when they're picking. And if the phone rings, I'd like to see Omar Khan maybe make a little bit of a move down.
Yep.
In terms of speaking of Omar Khan, been very active in the trade market. One of the big reasons why the Steelers need a receiver now is because they sent Deontay Johnson to the Carolina Panthers. There's a lot of, I don't know if I want to say rumors, but chatter about the possibility of acquiring Brandon Aiyuk. There was some chatter that they might try to reach out to Washington about Terry McLaurin. Do you think that there could be another trigger pulled and another trade made to bring in that other outside receiver, and it not just be it's a big proven name?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough because when the Steelers traded Deontay Johnson for Dante Jackson to Carolina, the 1-for-1 trade, I mean, now that they got that salary cap, they reworked Jackson's deal and they got some salary cap relief. I was trying to tell people, like, you can't judge a trade like 1-for-1 because they're not comparable players. Like, Deontay's very good. Like, regardless of what you think of him, he's at the bare minimum, a borderline, like wide receiver 1, high end wide receiver 2 type. Jackson is more of like a stopgap. I think he's just really going to be like a 1-year option. We'll see how he plays this year. Maybe he can work himself into, sticking around for a long time. But having said that, I'm curious on what they're going to do with the additional money that they created. They saved some money on the cap. Like, could they be aggressive in a trade? And like I said, it's just very weird to me that we're 3 weeks away from the draft and they have these two really glaring needs at center and wide receiver. And like, that's just typically, like we talked about Omar Khan and the way that he's done things in the past. It's just not how they've typically operated. They wanted to go into the draft with at least like stopgap type of options. And to be quite honest with you, and like no disrespect to, Nate Herbig or like Van Jefferson, like we talked about, those guys they're just not baseline starters in the league. Like,
sure.
You can't convince, no matter how you look at it, they're just not. And like, that's just typically not how they've operated, because you want to go into the draft with, it's never going to be purely best player available, but you want to be able to take the best player available at a position of need. And it's, you have more needs than just these two. Ideally, you'd like to go get a corner. You'd like to get a tackle upgrade over Dan Moore. But the way that they've kind of pigeonholed themselves in, it almost feels like they have to come away in the first like 2 rounds with a center and wide receiver, or else those are going to be major deficiencies next year, barring a trade. You mentioned Brandon Aiyuk. Could they go out and get him? Look, I love the draft. People overrate draft picks all the time, and I say this as someone who does it.
I'm so happy that I finally have someone on my side about this. Oh my God, yes. Continue.
I love it. Look, it's my favorite time of the year. It takes an unbelievable amount of my time, but I absolutely love the draft. People overrate the hell out of draft picks, and I would have zero doubts. It would take me about 30 seconds to send this first round pick this year for Brandon Aiyuk and sign him to an extension that would make him one of the top 5 highest paid receivers. I think Aiyuk is fantastic. One of the best route runners in the game, creates separation at all 3 levels, can get his own buckets on the outside. Like, he's everything you want an alpha receiver to be. I know he was extremely productive last season, kind of broke out a little bit. I have no qualms with him outside of the Shanahan system. So if they did want to go get a guy, I mean, it's going to cost you a ton, and I completely understand that. I am of the opinion of I am always going to be willing to spend premium draft capital or premium money on premium players, especially when they come in a position like this that really matters a lot in today's NFL, which is receiver.
And that's the thing. Like, people are like, "Oh man, how could you trade a first round pick? You could." Well, no one that they take in the first round no one is going to be as good as Brandon Aiyuk is right now.
Or probably down the road.
Yes, exactly. And when people like look at how the Rams attacked I guess the lack of draft for the last few years. We're like, okay, we're gonna build our team by sending draft picks for proven guys that we know are good, and it won them a Super Bowl. Not to say that if the Steelers trade for Brandon Aiyuk, they'll immediately win a Super Bowl, but
Sure.
it puts them in a hell of a lot better spot than they would be with, like, if you can get Brand, shouldn't be that much. It shouldn't be that difficult of a discussion.
Yeah, and like I said, I love the potential of Adonai Mitchell, Brian Thomas Jr. would have no qualms with taking either of those guys in the first round, whether it's at 20 or in a trade back. But at the same time, Ayuk just turned 26 years old. Like you talk about, like trying to make a push for a Super Bowl. I mean, I think I speak for a lot of Steeler fans or people out there that follow this team. I just want to see a playoff win, man. And like
Yeah, man.
the way to do that is like you got to have guys that change the way that defenses play you on a weekly basis. And I think that Aiyuk really is that type of player, like with the way that he can get open, the separation ability. He makes big plays. He's great after the catch, has really good hands, can go up and get the football at the high point. Like he's such a well-rounded receiver. I mean, and two, like I remember when this was kind of coming about, a couple weeks ago, and I think San Francisco's going to end up keeping him. So it might be a, non-talking point, but
Sure.
I remember like talking about this, and like people are saying, Ayuk's he's not a number one or not a top 10 guy. And I'm like, dude, y'all are not paying attention. Y'all are not paying attention. And y'all didn't watch the Steelers opener last year because they couldn't check him at all. So, and I know that was Patrick Peterson out there, but he's a great player, man.
I think he led the NFL in terms of like receptions per route run, some advanced stat of that nature.
He was literally top 5 in pretty much every metric that everybody posts on them freaking graphs on Twitter all the time. He was top 5 in everything last year. And I don't know, man. It's just that I am on your side with that. I love the draft, but sometimes like when people start getting all up in arms about trading draft picks for proven great players, it really does. It grinds my gears. I'm sorry.
And especially when it comes to, someone at a position like receiver right now where, it's so important in today's NFL to have good receivers, and the Steelers have spent so little money on offense where, like, if you're going to pay low money, then expect low money results from that side of the ball. And that's what they've gotten over the past few years. So I would like to see them, and look, credit to Omar Khan, they've made a ton of splashes already. I would like to see them make one more, whether it be Aiyuk, whether it be, a Terry McLaurin. If they wanted to call Seattle about DK Metcalf, I don't know. I don't care. Get somebody.
Yeah, I think like that's the thing. Like a good quote that I heard like a couple off seasons, and it's kind of like stuck with me. You are what you invest in. Like, don't complain about your DB room if you'll never draft a corner in the first 2 rounds. Don't complain about, your lack of a pass rusher. You can't find guys that can get home one-on-one, but you don't take those guys early in the draft. Like you have to understand that that's just what it is. And, and like I said, I don't know. It feels like to me, and I've had this like feeling and no like inside information or anything like that, but it feels like to me that there is something coming. Like they're going to fill one of those 2 really big positions at wide receiver or center before the draft. And I think they may try to like make a trade to kind of solidify one of those spots to where it's not as pressing of a need. We'll have to see like if that ends up coming to fruition. But yeah, I'm with you. I mean, Metcalf is another interesting player. I mean, to be completely honest with you, I have been very just perplexed by what in the world Seattle's doing this offseason. Yeah. I have not liked their approach, aside from like McDonald, who I think is fantastic. I've just been very curious on like what it is that they're doing. So that would be a team that I'd be kind of wondering, like, are you guys taking a step back this year? And do you need this, 6'3" guy who runs the 4-3, or can you send him my way?
Well, yeah. What exactly would it take to get that alien that you have on the last side? We could use another one of those. That would be great. In terms of your personal favorite receivers that you would like to see, who are a couple names that maybe we haven't mentioned yet, or just briefly have that you'd like to see come draft time the Steelers take?
Yeah, I mean, I think if anybody like follows me on Twitter, or, on my YouTube channel, they pretty much know how much I love A.D. Mitchell. So, I mean, I think that just some of the other names I think that make a lot of sense. We mentioned Piel Purifoy. That one makes a ton of sense. Another guy that I think is like very, very likely, and he kind of grew on me the more that I watched film on him, was Xavier Legette for South Carolina. I mean, he's very, very promising player just from an athletic trait standpoint. Very explosive, has a good frame, straight line speed, very evident, ran a sub 4.4, and that shows up on tape. Kind of operates a lot out of the slot, like kind of this power slot. He was excellent on crossers last year. But he's really good at the catch point too, like really good hang time, really good leaping ability, kind of fits the bigger bodied, kind of big receiver mold that Arthur Smith typically gravitates towards. And they've shown a lot of interest in him. They saw him at the Senior Bowl. He's a top 30 visit. I like both of the Washington guys. Like if you're talking about day 2 receivers, I think Jalen McMillan is one of the most, not just underrated receivers, but underrated players in this draft class right now because he was banged up last year. But 2022, his tape was fantastic when I watched it over the summer. Jalen Polk, kind of like a jack of all trades type of receiver. Doesn't really have that trump card, but really good hands. And I think is going to be a high level wide receiver 3 or potentially even maybe like a wide receiver 2 in the right fit. But yeah, I mean, this class is really good. It's just a matter of, can you get guys that can come in and play right away? Because, the Steelers, you could play rookies right away, but it's just normally, if you're going to rely on them to be like the number 2 option, I think it does depend on a little bit what you get. Because even a guy like Leggett, who's a 5th-year senior, older prospect, he just wasn't asked to do a ton in that South Carolina offense. I mean, it was really just like, hey, you're really big and you're really fast. Go run in a straight line and we'll get you the football. And like to their credit, like Leggett was very good at that last year. But in terms of like, can he come in and like run the full route tree? Like I'm a little bit skeptical about that. Now, maybe if you're only throwing the ball 25 times a game, yeah, like let's send this dude on a couple posts. Like let's get him on a drag route. Let's have him on all these different crosses on play action and make that work while he continues to develop. But I think Leggett, to me, him and Pierce are kind of the 2 targets that I think that they're looking at pick 51. I mentioned Malachi Corley earlier. He's a guy who, I'm a little bit lower on the consensus just because I do understand the vision with him. I think, he's excellent with the football. Can break tackles, excellent contact balance. I mean, he's a tank in the open field. There is just not a lot of promising, tangible evidence, I think, that he can be this NFL level wide receiver from a route running standpoint. Like he's just so unrefined and so raw from that. And I almost feel like Western did him a little bit of a disservice by his usage over the past couple seasons. Cause I mean, they threw the dude almost 80 screens. I mean, like that was what he did for the offense and he carried a big load for them, but it was just like, there's not like, he's just so unrefined as a route runner. I think he's just so much more of a projection than I feel like maybe even people are assuming he is, but I know they've shown interest in him too. So maybe he's a day 2 option.
I just spoke to Jamari Thrash for a feature piece I'm doing on him. I don't know how much investment the Steelers have shown in him. I haven't seen any sort of top 30 visit or anything of that nature for him. But what are your thoughts on Jamari Thrash, Louisville?
Yeah, he's a fun player, man. I got to see Thrash. I am a Louisville native, so I got to see Thrash quite a bit last year after transferring. I mean, he was highly productive, really throughout college, man. I mean, really good route runner, nuanced route runner, understands how to get open. He could set defenders up, get them turned around, does a good job attacking the blind spot. I think he's a pretty good athlete. I mean, I wish he would have, I think he's a solid to good athlete. I wish he would have tested a little bit better because the testing numbers probably weren't what they needed to be in order for him to sneak into the day 2 of this draft with how many talented receivers there are. But he's a guy who, if he lands in the right spot, man, I think that there are a lot of things to like about his game. I mean, like I said, he was heavily productive, pretty smooth player, like a little bit better at the catch point than you would probably imagine. But he knows how to get open, and that's a very valuable trait. He can create separation on his own. I do think that Thrash, like the way he played in college, I'm a little bit concerned about, his translation against press coverage, like right out the gate. But, if you can, get him off the ball a little bit, move him around, I do think that there's potential for him to be, like a wide receiver 3 type at the next level. Especially like he could, like I said, this receiver class is so talented and it's a flavor thing, right? Like it just depends on what scheme, what type of archetype you're looking at, but he could go to a really good situation and come in and play right away because he's played a lot of ball, like and been very productive. So,
yeah. Well, the main takeaway from this is that if you can trade for Brandon Aiyuk, you can trade for Brandon Aiyuk.
Oh, yeah.
Here. What do you got coming on the YouTube channel over at Steelers Now in the near future?
Yeah, man. Just like I said, it's that time of the year for us, man, trying to wrap up all these this draft content, try to wrap up evals, try to get to some players I haven't watched as much of, try to get as much rankings or, big board stuff out there as I can. But yeah, just at Steelers_DB on Twitter, YouTube, and then all my written work at Steelers Now. Of course, you know how the grind is, man. It doesn't stop, but it's going to be a really fun month. I'm really excited to see, how all these pieces kind of unfold. And, Omar Khan, man, he keeps us on our toes. So I'm excited about seeing like what kind of splash he's bringing to the table.
Absolutely, man. I'm looking forward to what the next few weeks are going to bring, both from the draft and, like you just said, if the Steelers get a little bit more frisky and raise some more eyebrows with another move. In terms of me, check out the feature piece I did on Kalen Carson. That's available on USA Today right now, and then continued coverage of the Steelers at Behind the Steel Curtain for SB Nation. All Steelers coverage every day. Busy over there. Derek, I always love talking to you, buddy. We'll do more of this throughout the off season, and yeah, man, just looking forward to seeing what content you continue to bring. I love you. I love the stuff that you do. So it's always fun to be able to do this with you.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate you having me on. Anytime I can get a chance to talk ball and, ramble and rant about the game is always a good thing for me. So I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Appreciate everybody for watching. Like, subscribe to the channel, all that fun YouTube stuff. Let's get to 1,000 subs before the season starts. That would be just lovely. So appreciate y'all for tuning in to this week's Black and Gold Breakdown. You can go watch the last one we just did with Nick Farball as well. So all the Steelers Now boys are joining me, and it's just a great time. So appreciate y'all for tuning in. We'll see you soon.